Picture this scenario: you enter the world in the shadow of the planet's tallest peak. It dominates your skyline, a constant reminder of majesty. But an ancient rule says you can never touch the summit. Do you bow your head and follow the script, or do you burn the rule book? One girl refused to look away. She watched fathers and brothers march toward glory, while mothers vanished into the background. But she dared to voice a thought that terrified the elders. Chasing that thought would drain her bank account, turn her neighbors into critics, and force her to stare down the Grim Reaper on 3 distinct occasions. This isn't just a climbing log. It is the chronicle of a quiet revolution. One woman's stubborn refusal to stay put didn't just conquer a summit, it woke up a country. It all started with a whisper in the thin, freezing air of her youth. Imagine living on the roof of the world but being told the attic is off limits. Let's rewind to 1961. Deep in the Himalayas of Nepal, in a hamlet called Sirka, a legacy begins. She arrives in the Solukhumbu district, a place that sounds mysterious to outsiders but holds a hard reality. To her, this wasn't an exotic destination, it was just the backyard. The oxygen is scarce here and the skyline is made of ice. Her tribe is the Sherpa. While the world sees them as legendary mountaineers, for them these peaks are just the office. A dangerous, unforgiving factory floor where life is earned or lost. From the moment she could walk, she witnessed the parade. Strangers arriving in neon Gore-Tex and plastic boots, eyes fixed on the stratosphere. To get there, they needed the men of her village. The local guys were the engines powering everyone else's dreams. These men returned as conquerors, spinning yarns of avalanches and frostbite. But for a girl in this valley, the ceiling wasn't glass. It was rock and ice 8,000 meters high. The peaks were a clubhouse for men. Women were the anchors, grounded in the dirt, no exceptions. The cultural script was ironclad. Like every woman before her, her future was pre-printed: manage the hearth, feed the kids, and pray the mountain didn't swallow your husband. Her life was meant to be lived in the waiting room. The idea of her strapping on crampons, it wasn't just discouraged, it was laughable, a delusion. It went against the grain of the entire social fabric. Yet she stood there inhaling the same razor-sharp air, staring at the exact same target as the men. Does the mountain really check your gender before letting you pass? That question simmered in her mind for decades. As the girl became a woman, the trap seemed to close. Life pushed her onto the standard track, worn smooth by generations of obedient wives. She tied the knot with Pasang Lhamu Sherpa. Usually, this is where the adventure ends. But this union wasn't a cage. It was a launch pad. Lakpa wasn't your average villager content with the status quo. He was a visionary who understood the changing tides of tourism. He looked at the glaciers and saw a gold mine, and in his wife, he saw a partner, not a servant. Together, they made a power move that disrupted the local economy. They launched their own outfit. Picture this in an industry dominated by testosterone: a husband and wife build an empire side by side. They christened it Tamsirku Trekking. Before long, that brand became legendary among anyone obsessed with the Himalayas. This was more than just logistics. They became the translators between adrenaline junkie Westerners and the silent spiritual power of the locals. Their reputation for safety and skill skyrocketed. They weren't just participating, they were leading. They opened routes, employed half the village, and stacked up serious capital. They had influence. They had comfort. By all accounts, she had made it. She was the boss, dispatching teams into the wild. But running the show from a desk wasn't enough. The summit was still there mocking her. The childhood question came roaring back louder than ever, so she made a choice that terrified everyone. She decided to clock out of the office and step into the death zone. She didn't start this in her prime athletic years. She was a mother, a CEO, a woman established in her ways. No Olympic medals on the shelf, just a burning gut instinct and the bankroll she had earned with her own sweat. She didn't tackle the monster immediately. She cut her teeth on trekking peaks like Pasang and Yala. Pros call these warm-ups. For her, they were boot camp. Every ascent was a masterclass in suffering. She mastered the art of walking on knives, regulating oxygen, and trusting a thin nylon line with her life. The romance of the mountains vanished, replaced by burning lungs and screaming quads. But with every meter gained, the prison bars of her childhood melted away. She wasn't a spectator anymore. She was the protagonist. She learned the language of the ice, deciphering creaks and groans, and developed the most critical skill of all, listening to the mountain's mood. The training honed her mind like a blade. Survival wasn't the only goal anymore. She turned her gaze to the ultimate prize, Sagarmatha, to the locals, Everest to the rest of us. Her ambition grew teeth. The mission was simple, but heavy: become the first Nepalese woman to plant her flag on the roof of the world. She wanted to be a beacon for every daughter of Nepal. you'd assume the country would rally behind her. Right, a national hero in the making. Wrong. She slammed face first into a wall harder than granite tradition. When she voiced her plan, the applause never came. Instead, she faced a tidal wave of judgment. Conservative society recoiled. Climbing is for men. You'll die and leave your kids. Know your place. Her bravery wasn't seen as strength. It was viewed as a glitch in the system. She was rich, married, successful. Why throw it away for a rock? She could feel the judgment in every handshake, but while neighbors gossiped, the government set up roadblocks. Pasang Lhamu tried to play by the book, entering the labyrinth of official channels. She leveraged her business savvy to propose a historic all-female Nepalese team. She filed the paperwork with the Ministry of Tourism, requesting the golden ticket, a climbing permit. The rubber stamp never came down. Rejected. Their excuse, insufficient experience. She reapplied. Rejection number 2 and number 3. The bureaucrats in Kathmandu didn't see a pioneer. They saw a walking disaster and a political headache. They gave her the polite bureaucratic no. It was infuriating. She could scale glaciers, but she couldn't climb over a pile of paperwork. The desk jockeys were proving harder to defeat than the elements. The battle for a stamp became an expedition of its own. While she argued in offices, the climbing season was ticking away. International teams were already packing their yaks and heading to base camp. She was stuck in the corridors of power while the ice was calling. She realized that waiting for permission to lead was a trap. If she wanted the summit, she had to kill her ego and change her angle. If she couldn't run the show, she'd hitch a ride. She began hunting for a team with an empty bunk. She didn't care about the title of leader anymore. She just needed physical access to the mountain's base. Her pivot worked. In 1990, a French team touched down in Nepal. Pasang saw the window and dove through. She stopped asking to command and started negotiating for a seat at the table. Deals were cut, cash was moved, and she was in. But the dynamic was different. She was a guest on a foreign ticket. No fanfare, no national leadership role, just a climber in the back of the line facing the unknown. Now came the truth. She faced the southeast ridge, navigated the terrifying shifting blocks of the Khumbu icefall, and ground her way up the Lhotse face. Her body screamed, but her mind held. She proved to the skeptics and herself that she belonged in the high atmosphere. They made it to the South Col, that flat, wind-blasted wasteland at 8,000 meters, where the air is too thin to sustain life. The summit was right there. It was tantalizingly close. But the mountain had other plans. The team leadership pulled the plug. Maybe the weather turned or logistics crumbled, it didn't matter. The verdict was final. She was standing on the front porch of history, but was slammed in the face by the door. Most would quit. She used the heartbreak as ammunition. She came down from the heights, not as a failure, but as a veteran. She had memorized the route. She had tasted the altitude. And next time, she wouldn't be guessing, she'd be executing. Fast forward to the very next year, 1991. Most people would take a break, but she is already locked and loaded for round 2. The vibe, however, has completely shifted. She is no longer just a participant in a foreigner's game. This is the Sherpa Everest expedition. It is organized by her community, funded by her people, and led by her own husband. Pasang Lhamu steps up as the deputy leader, meaning she is finally one of the bosses calling the shots. The weight on her shoulders is massive, but so is her resolve. They stick to the standard route, yet she moves with a renewed swagger. She knows this beast now. The treacherous icefall, the sheer Lhotse face, the desolate South Col, they are old acquaintances. The terrain that once seemed alien is now familiar ground. The squad operates with military precision, climbing higher and harder than before. They smash past the 8,700-meter mark, clawing their way to the ridge just shy of the south summit. At this altitude, the entire planet is sprawled out beneath her boots. The ultimate prize is tantalizingly close, literally just a few hours of climbing remain. It looks like one final lung-burning sprint is all that stands between her and history. But mountains are not dead rock. They are temperamental monsters. Right at that critical juncture, Everest wakes up and decides to unleash its dark side. The weather flips in a heartbeat. Winds scream into hurricane-force gales, turning the air into a blinding white soup. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. Their oxygen tanks are ticking down to zero. The team is staring down a brutal ultimatum gamble, everything for glory and likely die or retreat and survive to fight another day. It is a gut-wrenching call, but survival instinct wins. They turn around. That makes 2 years running, where Everest lured her in, let her get within touching distance, and then slammed the door in her face. It is a psychological torture being taunted with the taste of victory, only to hit a wall of ice at the 11th hour. Being rejected twice at the finish line would break the spirit of most climbers. But Pasang Lhamu isn't built like most people. For her, rejection isn't a stop sign, it is high-octane fuel. She realizes there is no time for self-pity or second-guessing. The mountain isn't going anywhere, but her physical prime and her financial window won't stay open forever. She has to strike while the iron is hot. She barely takes a breath before diving back in. By the winter of 1992, she refuses to wait for the comfortable spring season. Instead, she signs up for a joint Russian-Nepalese mission to scale Cho-Oyu. This is the 6th highest peak on Earth, and tackling it in the dead of winter is a savage test for even the most elite alpinists. But make no mistake, this isn't about bagging a new peak for her resume. This is a training camp, a dress rehearsal for the main event. She uses the brutal conditions to harden her mind and body, perfecting her acclimatization. She powers up to 7,000 meters, then intentionally holds back. She doesn't need the summit, she needs the conditioning. Her eyes remain locked on the big one, Everest. That freezing winter expedition was just the warm-up act. The real show kicks off in the spring of 1992. Pasang Lhamu finally makes the move the climbing world has been anticipating. She steps up to run the show entirely on her own terms. She launches her own squad, the Nepalese Women's Everest Expedition. This is historic, the first all-female, all-Nepalese crew to ever attempt the roof of the world. The stakes have skyrocketed. It is no longer just about her personal ambition. She is now carrying the hopes, dreams, and pride of every woman in her country. The pressure is heavy enough to crush a person. It hangs over her like a hanging glacier. The entire nation is watching, and the press is documenting every step. So here we are in the spring of 1992. She is standing at the base of the giant for the 3rd time in 3 years. The path up is etched into her brain. She knows every hidden crevasse in the Khumbu icefall better than the back of her hand. She guides her team with the swagger of a war veteran navigating the frozen minefield with precision. Meter by meter, they grind their way upward. They check off the landmarks, the silent heat of the western Chiwem, the glassy ice of the Lhotse face, the desolation of the South Col. Every camp reached is a battle won. Then they cross into the death zone, where the air is so thin it feels like breathing through a straw while running a marathon. It is pure agony, but they push past their previous record. They hit 8,750 meters. This is uncharted territory for her. The South Summit isn't a distant dream anymore. It is right there staring her in the face. The true summit is barely 100 vertical meters away. This is it, the final sprint. And then the universe plays a sick joke. The mountain doesn't just push back, it attacks. The weather collapses, instantly slamming them with a wall of wind and snow that hits like a physical blow. It isn't just a storm. It feels like the mountain is actively trying to kill them. Visibility hits absolute zero. Continuing upward would be a straight-up suicide mission. For the 3rd year in a row, standing on the precipice of glory, she has to make the call. Turn back, retreat. Again. Back in the cities, her journey is turning into a national soap opera. To her supporters, she is a titan of resilience and unbreakable spirit. But the critics are starting to get loud. You can hear the whispers, maybe she just can't do it. Maybe the mountain has rejected her. The pressure cooker is whistling, threatening to explode. This has transcended sports or personal achievement. It is now entirely about honor and redemption. She feels cornered with no option but to launch one final desperate assault regardless of the price tag. A 4th attempt. Think about that. 3 times the mountain said no. 3 times she was shoved back from the gates of heaven. A lesser person would have crumbled, packed their bags, and gone home. But Pasang Lhamu takes the bitterness of those failures and converts it into pure rage and drive. She cannot stop. This is her personal war, her magnificent obsession. Spring 1993. She returns to the foot of the ice giant. But the vibe this time is intense. It is different. The operation is scaled up massively. This isn't just a climb anymore. It feels like an invasion. Her Nepalese Women's Everest expedition has morphed into a component of a massive international coalition. On paper, Pasang is listed as the deputy leader, but nobody is fooled. Everyone knows she is the engine, the heartbeat, and the soul of this machine. And she has more than just her husband's money backing her now. Corporate heavyweights have entered the chat. San Miguel Beer is a major sponsor. Their logos plastered on the tents and parkas represent massive funding, but they also bring a crushing weight of expectation. There is no room for failure when you are wearing a billboard. At base camp, that sprawling tent city, all eyes track her movements. The veteran international climbers notice a shift in her demeanor. It isn't just determination anymore. It is a scary, laser-focused intensity. She has the look of someone who has stared into the abyss. She is wound tight like a violin string stretched to the breaking point, ready to snap. One European pro later commented that the energy coming off her team was desperate, almost manic. It felt like they had collectively decided that no cost was too high for the summit. For the Western tourists and pros, climbing is a sport, a lifestyle, and adventure. For Pasang, those definitions died long ago. This is not a hobby. This is a gladiator match. It is a fight for her existence. She is fighting for her name, for the dignity of Nepalese women, and to ensure history remembers her as a conqueror, not a nearly made it footnote. She has burned every bridge behind her. Doubt has been banished. Her eyes communicate a single terrifying message. It is me or the mountain. She has pushed all her chips to the center of the table. The mountain has accepted the bet. The final act of this tragedy is ready to play out. The summit team, the spearhead of the expedition, gears up for the push. Naturally, Pasang Lhamu is at the front. Flanking her is her shadow and protector, Mount Sherpa. This man isn't just a guide, he is royalty on the mountain, having stood on the summit 5 times already. He can read the wind and ice like a book. Rounding out the assault team are 2 powerhouse Sherpas, Pemba Norbu and Lakpa Gelu. On paper, this is a dream team, strong, experienced, and lethal. They select the southeast ridge, the classic route paved by the pioneers. It is the most traveled road to the heavens. But Everest hates complacency. It has a nasty habit of rewriting the script. Right out of the gate, things feel off. They are moving slower than the timeline demands. Legs feel like lead. Lungs burn more than usual. Time, the only currency that matters in the death zone, is bleeding away. Down at the lower camps, observers are glued to their binoculars, watching the tiny black dots inch upward. The radios are buzzing with nervous chatter. The veterans are shaking their heads. They can see the disaster unfolding in slow motion, even if the climbers can't. They are dragging. They are way behind schedule. The golden rule of Everest is simple. If you haven't tagged the top by 2 in the afternoon, you turn around. Period. No debate. Because if you are late, the mountain will kill you in the dark. But Pasang is deaf to the logic. Or perhaps she refuses to listen. She plows forward with stubborn grit, incinerating her last reserves of energy and oxygen. Finally, on April 22nd, 1993, way past the safety deadline, it happens. The sun is already dipping toward the horizon, offering light but zero warmth. In that fading glow, they take the final step. They are standing on the roof of the world. Pasang Lhamu Sherpa has done it. She is the first Nepalese woman to summit Everest. She has silenced every critic. She has vindicated herself to her country and the world. The dream she suffered and bled for has materialized. For a fleeting second, it feels like she has tamed the beast. It feels like the credits are about to roll on a happy ending. She gazes down at the globe beneath her boots, and in that split second of ultimate victory, a smile of pure, unadulterated joy freezes on her face. But on Everest, reaching the top is only halfway. And frankly, it is the easy half. The rush of victory vanishes instantly, replaced by a cold, hard reality. A quick photo, a glance at the watch, and terror grips them. They are out of time, and darkness is coming. Luck hasn't just run out, it has been completely snatched away by the mountain as payment for that fleeting moment of glory on the summit. They begin their descent, but they are catastrophically behind schedule. The sun, once their guide, is no longer an ally. It has become an indifferent spectator, sinking low and preparing to abandon them to the darkness below the horizon. And that is the exact moment Everest drops the mask to reveal its true terrifying nature. In the blink of an eye, the brilliant postcard blue sky is swallowed whole by a suffocating leaden gray. The wind picks up instantly. At first, it is just a warning gust, but within minutes, it transforms into an icy predator, stalking the ridgeline, knocking the climbers off their feet, and ripping the last heat from their burning lungs. The temperature doesn't just drop, it crashes with every passing minute. Each exhale freezes instantly, turning into a cloud of needle-sharp frost before it even leaves their lips. They are trapped on the absolute worst section to be stuck in a storm, the knife-edge ridge that acts as a terrifying bridge between the main summit and the south summit. Look to the left, and it is a sheer vertical drop down into Nepal. Look to the right, and it is a free fall into Tibet. A single misstep, a loose crampon, or a moment of dizziness will be their last. And in this frozen hellscape, the strongest member of the team begins to break. Sonam Tsering, a veteran with 5 Everest summits, a man who was supposed to be as solid as the rock itself. Suddenly, his movements become clumsy and erratic. He starts stumbling on sections of ground that should be easy for him. Pasang turns back and sees the look in his eyes, blank, glazed over, and unfocused. It is the dreaded sign every high-altitude climber fears. The brain, brutally starved of oxygen, is beginning to malfunction and shut down the body systems. And then gravity wins. Sonam just collapses into the deep snow. That is it. He simply cannot go on. For the rest of the team, the realization hits like a physical blow. Their lifeline, their most dependable guide and strongest asset, has instantly transformed into a heavy, immobile liability. Pemba and Lakpa rush to get him upright, but in the thin air at this extreme altitude, a human body feels like it weighs a ton. He is nothing but dead weight. They pull at his harness, they push him, they scream right into his face, trying to spark any remnant of consciousness left inside. But it is no use. The legendary Sherpa is no longer in control of his own body. For Pasang, the dream that had just become a reality is curdling into a brutal trap right before her eyes. They are perched on the edge of an abyss, balancing on a narrow ridge of ice and rock, and their most experienced teammate is helplessly freezing to death, mere yards from the top of the world. A single terrifying thought hammers in the minds of the other Sherpas, a thought as cold and sharp as the point of an ice axe. We have to move. We have to get down right now before the storm hits with its full lethal force, while they still have a sliver of a chance to survive. It is the brutal arithmetic of survival at 8,000 meters. The mountain has absolutely no room for sentimentality. Attempting to carry one person who cannot move can drag 2, 3, or all of them down into the void. Pemba and Lakpa look to Pasang, their eyes filled with desperation and a silent, pleading question. They are waiting for her call. She is the expedition leader. Her word is the law. And usually, the law of the mountain is simple: save yourself. But as Pasang looks down at Sonam's still form, her loyal friend and climbing partner, she doesn't just see a logistical problem to be solved. She sees the man who helped her reach the summit of her dreams. To leave him here would be a betrayal, not just of him, but of her own soul. A betrayal of every value she believed in. This is a decision you do not make with your head. You make it with your heart. It flies in the face of every survival instinct, encoded in human DNA. And then Pasang's voice cuts through the howling wind. It is quiet, but as solid and unshakable as the frozen rock beneath their boots. She is not leaving. She refuses to abandon the man who stood with her at the top. To the other Sherpas, her words sound like a death sentence. They try to change her mind, the sheer terror audible in their shouting voices. Staying here, they plead, is suicide. They have no tent, no sleeping bags, and not nearly enough oxygen to survive the night at this elevation, but she is unmovable. And then comes the hardest moment of their lives. The group fractures. Those with any strength, left with hearts breaking in their chests, turn their backs and begin a desperate descent into the encroaching darkness, forced to leave their leader behind on the ridge. Every step they take downward is a torturous choice between loyalty and their own survival, but Pasang Lhamu remains. She kneels beside Sonam, sharing at 8,750 meters, two tiny specks on a narrow blade of ice suspended above the abyss. The wind howls like a wounded beast, hurling shards of ice directly into her face. She tries to shield him with her own body curling around him, but it is like trying to stop an avalanche with an open hand. The temperature plummets, cutting through every layer of clothing, freezing them to the very bone. The oxygen in her canister is nearly gone. Every single breath requires a monumental, gasping effort. They are completely alone now, on the roof of the world, which in just a few hours has become their frozen trap. Above them, the indifferent, diamond-hard stars begin lighting up in the inky black sky. Ahead of them lies a cold, dark night, a night in the death zone, caught in the crushing embrace of a merciless giant. Meanwhile, two men fight for every single step on the way down. Pemba Norbu and Lakpa Gelu are suffering. Every breath feels like a red-hot nail being driven into their lungs. Every step is a blind dance on the edge of an abyss. They aren't just descending, they are fleeing a howling storm that is hot on their heels. But it is not the physical pain that is the heaviest burden. Echoing in their minds are Pasang's words, her refusal to turn back. With every meter, they drop the distance between them and their leader grows terrifyingly wide. This isn't a descent to safety, it is a descent with a heavy heart. They finally stumble into Camp 4 on the South Col, sitting at around 8,000 meters. Here, surrounded by tattered yellow tents, flapping violently in the wind, it feels like they can finally breathe again. But it is just a brief respite before the next battle. They look at each other. There is no relief in their eyes, only a steely, grim determination. They cannot just sit here and wait. The plan forms in an instant unspoken. They have to grab fresh oxygen tanks and try to fight their way back up. It is insane. To head back into the very heart of the storm they just barely escaped is madness. But the thought of leaving them up there, that would be even crazier. Pemba Norbu, the strongest climber of the group, takes on the mission. He checks his gear, grabs 2 precious oxygen tanks, and takes a step outside the tent. He steps into another world. The wind isn't just moving air anymore. It is a solid wall, knocking him off his feet, trying to tear him from the icy slope. Visibility is absolute zero. The snow isn't falling, it is flying sideways, a million tiny needles stinging any exposed patch of skin. Pemba tries to move forward. He takes one step, then another. He screams, but the sound is swallowed instantly by the roaring gale. He tries to force his way through, to push through the wall of wind with his own body, but the mountain refuses to yield. Gaining just a few feet becomes an hour of superhuman effort. He stops and realizes the truth: it is impossible. To keep going would just be adding another name to the mountain's list of casualties. It is a defeat born not of weakness, but of utter powerlessness against the elements. With a heavy heart, Pemba Norbu turns back towards the tent, a tent that now feels like a prison. The last flicker of hope is fading, and high above on the frozen ridge, time itself begins to slow. For Pasang and Sonam, a strange silence descends. Not because the wind has stopped, but because their consciousness is beginning to dissolve into the icy fog of hypoxia and hypothermia. The cold doesn't burn anymore. It embraces them, sapping the last of their warmth, the last of their thoughts. They are no longer fighting. They just sit there side by side. 2 dark silhouettes against a raging universe beneath stars that now feel impossibly far away. On the night of April 22nd, bleeding into the 23rd, their struggle quietly comes to an end. Their final resting place is the icy ridge of Everest, just 100 meters from the summit they fought so hard to reach. The official accident report would be brief and clinical death due to hypothermia, extreme exhaustion, and the effects of altitude sickness, all brought on by extreme weather conditions. But behind those clinical words lies a story of incredible courage and a tragic choice. Down at base camp, the silence is pierced by the crackle of a radio. The news had just arrived yesterday. The summit had been reached. Pasang, the first Nepali woman on Everest. The camp is electric with energy. People are hugging, preparing to welcome the heroes back. This is a moment of pure national triumph, one you can feel even here at an altitude of 5,000 meters. It feels like the very air is ringing with joy and pride. But the next radio call, it is like an icy wind tearing through a warm tent. Instead of triumphant reports, there are only broken, anxious phrases. Talk of a storm, of lost contact, that the team isn't coming down. The joy evaporates instantly, replaced by a tense, heavy silence. Hour after agonizing hour, hope begins to fade, giving way to a chilling dread. And then finally, the awful truth comes through, delivered in the exhausted voice of Lahak Bagelu from the South Col. They are gone. In an instant, the celebration vanishes, replaced by a deafening, ringing silence. Yesterday's congratulations are now caught in their throats. People just stare at one another, unable to process this cruel and sudden twist of fate. The news comes down from the glaciers of Everest like an avalanche, racing down into the valley all the way to Kathmandu, by radio, by telephone. It spreads through the capital in a matter of hours, and what happens next is something unprecedented in the history of mountaineering. Nepal is plunged into mourning. Not an official mourning declared by some government decree. This is real, a grassroots grief, coming straight from the heart. Her body is still up there, on top of the world, among the clouds and ice, and her country is already mourning its heroine. It is absolutely unprecedented. People take to the streets not with flags, but with portraits of Pasang. Monasteries light thousands of candles. The usual chatter in tea houses and markets dies down, replaced by whispers about her bravery. Beyond the borders of Nepal, the narrative often loses its heartbeat. In the pages of niche international climbing journals or the ticker tape of global news, her passing is reduced to a grim footnote. To the rest of the world, it reads as just another cold statistic from the death zone, a perilous mountain, a gamble against the odds, and a tragic though entirely predictable conclusion. Western media might file her away as simply another name etched onto Everest's ever-growing casualty list. But within the valleys of Nepal, no one sees a number. They see an icon In her struggle and ultimate sacrifice, the nation recognized a reflection of its own soul, a small, often overlooked country that stood tall, proud, and ready to go toe-to-toe with the giants of the earth. Consequently, her death is not processed as a failure. It is viewed as a martyrdom. Forged in the searing pain of this tragedy, a myth is constructed. Pasang Lhamu Sherpa transcends the title of climber. She evolves into the nation's beloved daughter, an eternal celestial body frozen in time at the very roof of the world. Yet in the immediate aftermath, the country is tasked with a logistical nightmare, a challenge that teeters on the edge of impossibility. The grief is complicated by a brutal reality. The mountain is holding their heroine hostage, while the world of the living, down in the valleys, begins to process the shock and birth a legend. The physical reality remains unresolved. High above the clouds in the crushing silence of the stratosphere, the clock has effectively stopped. It is late April bleeding into early May. At an altitude exceeding 8,700 meters, resting on the precarious south summit, lies the frozen evidence of the disaster. This is the heart of what alpinists fearfully refer to as the zone of silence. At this elevation, the air is so devoid of oxygen that the human body cannot heal. It only deteriorates. With every single gasping breath, biological functions slowly shut down. Helicopters are useless here. The air is too thin for rotors to bite. Any attempt to retrieve a body isn't a cleanup operation. It is, by definition, another deadly full-scale expedition. And for the moment, the mountain has slammed its doors shut. The jet stream, a relentless river of wind in the upper atmosphere, hammers the ridge with hurricane-force violence, threatening to blast anything unsecured into the void of Tibet. Everest dictates the schedule, not humanity. And right now, the mountain's decree is absolute: everyone must wait. The days bleed into weeks, creating a vacuum of agonizing uncertainty. Far below at base camp, and amidst the dust of Kathmandu, team leaders and government officials scrutinize weather reports as if they were holy scriptures. They are hunting for a weather window, that elusive brief pause in the wind's ferocity that might allow for a safe ascent. But the skies refuse to clear. Compounding the collective anguish is a second haunting mystery: the fate of Sonam Chering. He was last spotted trying to make his way down. Is he lying beside Pasang in the snow, or did the wind claim him, sweeping him off the ridge and into the abyss? His unknown fate hangs over his family and teammates like a dark cloud. Meanwhile, amidst this purgatory of grief, a surreal juxtaposition plays out. The climbing season doesn't stop for tragedy. It is in full swing, driven by the ticking clock of commercial expeditions. Other teams comprised of climbers who have invested life savings and years of training are still gearing up for their own summit bids. Life, selfishly and stubbornly, continues on the slopes. Imagine the psychological toll pushing toward your lifelong dream, while knowing that directly in your path lies a fresh, frozen reminder of the ultimate price you might pay. These climbers must navigate past the south summit, and they are acutely aware of who is waiting for them up there. This isn't a historical anecdote from a book. It is a visceral reality. Pasang is now a ghost, guarding the final gate to the summit, a silent sentinel they must step past. Every boot placement upward brings them closer to their glory, but also closer to the exact coordinate where another's dream was extinguished. The upper slopes transform into a cruel open-air museum of ambition and loss, where the exhibits are the preserved bodies of those who never made it back down. This suspended state of limbo, caught between the weeping crowds below and the icy indifference of the peak above, makes the tragedy terrifyingly tangible. Then on May 10th, the static of the radio is broken. The excruciating wait ends, but the transmission from the high camps offers no comfort. It only delivers a chilling concrete finality. A Slovak mountaineer, Vlado Plulik, is battling through the hypoxia eyes fixed on the summit ridge. Suddenly his gaze catches an anomaly, a splash of artificial color disrupting the endless, blinding white of the snow. Just a few meters off the main route, slightly beneath the south summit, he locates Pasang. For her, the watch stopped ticking weeks ago. She is preserved in the ice, forever young. When this confirmation hits base camp, it crashes down like an avalanche. The grief previously buffered by a microscopic sliver of hope hardens into a jagged, piercing reality. But this confirmation triggers a new, desperate mission. Now that her location is confirmed, a cultural imperative takes over. For the Sherpa community, leaving her body exposed to the ravages of the wind and snow is a spiritual violation. It is unthinkable. plans are immediately drawn up for what will be the highest, most technically perilous recovery operation in the history of Everest. To lower a frozen body from 8,700 meters is a task that borders on science fiction. And this isn't just a descent, it is a complex vertical puzzle solved in the death zone, where the rescuers are already dying slowly, and where a single slip with the heavy load means everyone on the rope dies. The call goes out to the Brotherhood of the Mountains, the most elite Sherpas, the strongest guides with the deepest lungs and sturdiest legs, step forward. They unite, willing to wager their own lives to bring their fallen queen back to her people. But as they gear up, the shadow of the second missing climber lingers. If Pasang is there, where is Sonam search teams scour the exposed slopes, peering into the blue depths of crevasses, and behind towering seracs, risking everything. But the mountain refuses to yield him up. Sonam Chering is never found. He has simply vanished, absorbed into the icy majesty of the landscape he loved. His narrative concludes without a final period, becoming one of Everest's enduring enigmas. The agony of recovering one is compounded by the hollow ache of leaving another behind. With heavy hearts, the operation commences. This is no longer a rescue mission, it is a funeral procession in the sky. A team of the world's strongest climbers linked by ropes and a singular purpose begins the torturous descent. Inch by inch, foot by foot. Every step is a war against gravity, against the screaming wind, and against their own failing muscles. They are not merely dragging a lifeless weight, they are fighting the mountain for custody. They bear the weight of a national hero assister and the crystallized hope of millions. It is a slow, somber, and incredibly hazardous ritual. Finally, Everest, having taken her life so cruelly, reluctantly loosens its grip. Slowly, she is passed down from the heavens into the waiting arms of her community. Pasang Lhamu Sherpa is coming home. Eventually, she arrives in Kathmandu. The city that once waved her off with electric hope now embraces her with a heavy, quiet sorrow. The atmosphere is jarringly different, thick, humid, and fragrant with life, a stark contrast to the sterile, frozen vacuum of the summit. But today, the air feels oppressive, weighted down by a collective mourning. The battle on the slopes is finished. Now, in the valley, the epilogue of her saga begins. It is a chapter she will never read, written entirely by the people she left behind. What follows is far more than a standard memorial service. It is a nation bidding farewell to a piece of itself. The streets of the capital are transformed into a living river of humanity. Thousands, no tens of thousands, spill out from their homes, storefronts, and workshops. They create a human corridor along the procession route. Elders, children, royalty, and laborers, Sherpas, and city folk social barriers dissolve in the face of this shared loss. If you look into their eyes, you don't see emptiness, you see a potent cocktail of devastation and fierce pride. To them, Pasang wasn't just an athlete. She was their avatar, a diminutive woman who possessed the audacity to challenge the sky. Every slow step of the hearse is a silent conversation between a fallen hero and the people she inspired. The grief transcends local communities and grips the entire state. Her funeral is elevated to a state occasion. For the first time in the recorded history of Nepal, a woman is accorded such high honors. This act of recognition goes far beyond a tribute to her personal bravery on the ice. It serves as a long overdue validation of the Sherpa people and acknowledgement of their immense contributions and sacrifices that had for decades remained in the shadows of foreign glory. The Prime Minister, the royal family, they all bow their heads in respect. It is a silent admission she changed the game permanently. She dismantled the notion that the summit was a playground reserved for foreign thrill seekers, proving it belonged equally to those who call the Himalayas home. The accolades do not stop there. Posthumously, Pasang Lhamu Sherpa is decorated with the nation's highest civilian honor, the Star of Nepal. She shatters one final glass ceiling, becoming the first woman in history to receive this distinction. The medal is more than medal and ribbon. It is a full stop at the end of her earthly struggle and an ellipsis leading into her legacy. The star she never lived to see from the summit now shines perpetually next to her name. Her biography has ended, but the legend is only in its infancy. True legends aren't confined to textbooks. They live in the tea shops on the street corners and in the daily vernacular. This is precisely what happens with Pasang. She becomes woven into the fabric of daily life. Her determined gaze now stares back at the world from a small adhesive square of paper. Consider the significance. For the very first time in Nepal's history, a postage stamp bears the face of a woman. Not a mythical goddess or a royal queen, but a Sherpa daughter who dared to dream. It is a small piece of paper that carries a revolutionary weight. Now her story hitches a ride on every envelope, traveling to the most remote mountain villages and crossing international borders. It is a silent, traveling testament to her courage. Her name transitions from a headline into a household staple, a tangible piece of national identity that you can hold between your fingers. But a stamp was not enough to contain her memory. The nation needed to speak her name daily, and so the map was redrawn. A chaotic, vibrant artery in Kathmandu is rechristened the Pasang Lhamu Highway. Her name is no longer just a memory. It is a cardinal direction, a path that literally drives the capital forward. Taxi drivers, university students, and market vendors speak her name dozens of times a day as they navigate the city. Across the country, schools are inaugurated in her honor. Young girls sitting in classrooms now understand that education is their crampons and ice axe their personal route to the summit. Pasang transforms into their North Star, a tangible proof that the impossible is merely difficult. Then in the Budanil Kantha district, the tribute becomes physical. Amidst the noise and life of the city, a bronze statue rises. It stands not just as a monument to the dead, but as a challenge to the living. It serves as a timeless testament to victory and grit, a fleeting instant of glory locked in place. Her bronze likeness is caught in mid-step eyes, fixed eternally on the Himalayas she loved with such ferocity. Visitors do not travel here merely to gaze at a statue. They arrive to stand in reverent silence, to reflect on her journey, and to lay a hand on the cold alloy that encases a burning ambition, a dream now preserved for all eternity. While the physical monument stands as a permanent signal that the human will can scale any altitude, her ultimate tribute waits high above, returning her to the very heart of the peaks. In a move that had never been seen before, the leadership of Nepal stepped forward to bestow a rare and powerful distinction upon their fallen heroine. The towering summit of Jasamba, piercing the sky at 7,351 meters, was stripped of the title it had held for centuries. From that day forward, every cartographer on Earth would label it Pasang Lhamu Chuli. It was the ultimate metamorphosis. She did not merely conquer the rock and ice, she transformed into the mountain itself. Her identity is now etched into the crust of the earth, woven into the geology of the Himalayas. It is a level of immortality usually kept for deities, or the ancient crags themselves. Yet a spirit as vibrant as hers was never meant to be trapped in cold stone. While a mountain stands still, a true memory requires movement and life. Those closest to her, her grieving family, and loyal friends understood that Pasang's story had to actively do work. It needed to breathe. Consequently, the Pasang Lhamu Foundation came into existence. This shifted the focus away from statues and plaques to a dynamic, unstoppable force directed at the places crying out for aid. The mission targeted the very high-altitude villages she once called home. Her name evolved from a source of awe into a source of survival. It manifested as educational materials for children who previously had zero hope of entering a classroom. It transformed into thermal layers for infants trying to survive winters that freeze the world for 6 grueling months. It meant life-saving medical care for women isolated in the most unreachable corners of the country. The foundation became the pulsing engine of her aftermath, offering a lifeline to the neglected. Her original dream has been reincarnated in the laughter of hundreds of students and the relief in the eyes of mothers who finally have help. Gradually, her narrative began to eclipse the sport of climbing entirely. Observers started to recognize a deeper struggle. She hadn't just gone to war with the elements, she had waged war against a rigid societal structure. She fought against a system that dictated exactly where a woman should stay and what she was allowed to be. Pasang shattered those limitations, proving through blood and sweat that a woman belongs wherever her burning ambition leads her. She blazed a trail not just through the deep powder and ice falls, but through the stubborn mindsets of her culture. She stands now as a lighthouse, guiding thousands of Nepali women through the dark waters of doubt. Her stubborn refusal to kneel before red tape or chauvinism transformed into a rallying cry. Her life became the master key opening locked gates across the nation. Suddenly, young girls are entering athletic arenas, and women are launching enterprises. They see her visage and internalize the truth. If she could surmount Everest, I can conquer my own obstacles. For decades, the magnitude of her feat was a secret, held mostly by locals and experts. She was a titan within Nepal and revered among the elite fraternity of high-altitude climbers, but her reach was limited. To the wider world, she remained obscured by the massive shadow of Everest itself, relegated to a footnote in the long logs of summiteers. However, truth has a fluid nature. it inevitably finds a crack to flow through. Her saga began to leak across borders and transcend languages. Storytellers and documentarians globally began to dig into this Shakespearean tragedy on the slopes. They quickly understood that this was never just about altitude. It was a raw, visceral battle for human dignity, a testament to sheer willpower, and a stark look at the ultimate price of ambition. Her name ceased to be just foreign syllables. It became heavy with profound significance. Then, after nearly 30 years of quiet, a long-awaited explosion of recognition occurred. In the year 2022, the documentary Pasang in the Shadow of Everest premiered to global audiences. It struck with the force of a revelation. Finally, the planet witnessed the full scope of her journey. The film unleashed grainy archival reels showing the oscillation between desperate hope and crushing hardship. It showed her radiant smile, her moments of weeping, and the family that backed her until the tragic end. It stripped away the myth to reveal a flesh-and-blood woman grappling with genuine terror and possessing a resolve that could not be broken. Her soft-spoken voice and ironclad determination began to echo in dozens of tongues around the world. Millions who couldn't tell a carabiner from a crampon now whispered her name with respect. The legend of Pasang Lhamu Sherpa outgrew the borders of Nepal. It evolved into a universal anthem about the resilience of the human soul, a narrative that will continue to ignite fires in future generations. Her physical climb has ended, but her spiritual ascent continues forever rising.